Hello guys, welcome to today's lesson. Let's give the other members a few minutes to join so we can proceed. Let's give them like 3 minutes. So I think I'll begin. So we'll pick from where we left last week. Let me share my screen. So, minute. So this is where we were at last week. Let me run the site and see the place we reached. But before we proceed with the site, I want to introduce a few concepts on responsive web design so that we learn about them and then proceed in styling our application. So this is where we left at. We styled the nav, we styled the hero section, and we also converted our main section into a display of flex. So we still have the styling the main content, we style the newsletter section and the comments section and the footer for this site. But before that, I want us today to cover a few concepts on responsive web design, where we'll discuss the display and other aspects of responsive web design more in this section. So we'll be switching between the CamandeDevHub platform here and the .md file I created because I realized there was some content on responsive web design missing from our platform, which I'll update later today after this class. So, so the learning objective for this lesson is to first understand responsive web design, apply a mobile-first approach, and then use flexible unit and media queries, build responsive layout with flex and grid, create smooth transition and animation, and then apply the animation best practices for accessibility. So when we talk about responsive web design, you may note that our platforms or the websites we build are accessed across different platforms. We have them accessed on mobile phones, tablets, laptops, and desktop, which have different screen sizes. So instead of creating mobile web applications for each and every device, we need to come up or to approach the design process in a way that it accommodates for the different sizes. And responsive web design is important for a better user experience. And then it allows us to create one code for all devices and improve our search engine optimization, and it's for easier maintenance. We also talk about fast mobile first approach. This is where we design for small devices first before then we scale our site to take care of larger devices. And by taking this aspect into consideration, we'll find that we'll come up with websites that can be reused across all different platforms and will give a better user experience. So responsive web design is first introduced by the in the header by the HTML boilerplate we generated while we were creating this. So this meta content here with the name for viewport and then content, it gives the width device and an issue scale of 1, meaning that regardless of where the application has been opened, it will take into consideration the width of the device and display our content presentably. That is the importance of the meta tag there. And we'll also talk about responsive units. We have, I mentioned in our previous class, the different units we have in CSS. We have pixels, which are good for borders and icons. We have percentage, which are used for flexible width. We have the rem, the root element, which is useful for typography and spacing. We have the emphasis, which is for component scaling, and then we have the view width and the view height, which take sizing from the device width. Also, after knowing the different units we use in this responsive web design, there also are some considerations to make in our platforms, such as the image sizes, to ensure that our images do not overflow or are not proportional. So for example, we introduce concepts such as for images, we use the maximum width. This one, they will take the width of the container in which we are displaying them. And then we give an auto height so that the image is not shrinked or expanded and retain the aspect ratio of the image. In the previous lessons, I also talked about display systems in CSS. We have two display systems. That is, we have a Flexbox and a grid. So for Flex, we say that it is normally used where we need a one-dimensional display, and for grid we use it when we need a two-dimensional or rows with columns. For example, take an instance of let's say an e-commerce platform where you'll be displaying different products to in the product list with different fields such as for product name, uh, product price, and then product description, and maybe some have buttons for maybe accessing now the card to the product. For that and main content in our websites, we use a display of grid because we need the different layers, the different rows and columns. And then for navigation, navigation bars, cards, forms, and one-dimensional layouts is where we employ Flex. If you were in our previous class where we designed the form, you could remember, though I hadn't introduced these concepts, we talked about Flex when we were designing the form. So you can revisit the class if you hadn't done so. And then for grid, I have touched about it. We said it gives sorry, we have two types of it gives the two-dimensional display. You have the rows and the column, and then we have, like, you can define these different properties. We have the grid template columns, which defines the column, and then the order in which you want them to appear. We'll look into this when we are scaling our blog up. I'm just taking you or giving you an overview of this. We also have, that was on the display, and in relation to responsive web design, we also have media queries, which now define, or we define our styling depending on the different breakpoints or the different device width that exists. We have mobiles, device with tablets, laptops, desktop, etc. So we define the media query, and then you give the property that you want for the breakpoint. It could be a maximum width or a minimum width. Like, for example, in our example here, for all devices that have a width of 768 pixels and below, will have a flex direction. For the nav, here we are telling the nav, will have a column. That is a vertical display column for all that. And maybe you could have changed this with for larger devices, and then maybe use a horizontal navbar. That's a sample application of this media query. So you use the media query attribute, and then use the media query element, and then you give it the different styles that you want here. And it's like now you're defining a new CSS for the element and how you want it to be presented. We have the different, excuse, we have the different breakpoints, as I mentioned earlier. We have mobile phones, which have 0 to 768 pixels. We have tablets, 768 to 1023 pixels, and then laptops, 1024 to 1439 pixels. And we have desktops, which have 1440 pixels and above. We also have a concept of responsive typography. This is how your paragraphs, heading, and all the text appears in your devices. For example, we haven't talked about the clamp function, but this one now allows you to calculate the font size dynamically, where we pass in the minimum size first as the first argument, and then we pass in the preferred size, and lastly we pass in the maximum size. Also use the root element and clamp for scale and accessible text. We'll also talk about transitions in a nutshell. You'll have to, later on, you can catch up on the CamandeDevHub platform. I've discussed all these concepts in depth for the CSS tutorial. We have them. Yeah, so you can go through the platform at KamandeDevHub.com. We will see detailed and with detailed examples, the displays we're talking about, and then CSS basics on typography, style, and then responsive, reuse. You can access all of these in the platform. So maybe after this or during your free time, you can go through the content, do the exercises, style them. You can run them on the code editor. You can run them on the browser. This is just an example, like we give detailed examples which are for you to follow along, and run them on the browser as you read, manipulate them, navigate through them. You can see the examples I've been talking about of product cards and everything. So like, for example, this one is for a course. Yeah, so there's quite a lot, some good content there to learn with. These are just examples. You can look at the example of the styling we used for the nav bar here. Maybe the flex we are talking about, the flex direction, position, and everything. So go through these real world projects in here, but we're going to finish the blogging together. These are other examples. You can learn with them. Look at the stylings we use. Look at the animations we use for the objects, the scale on mouse hover, etc. And one thing to notice about these tutorials on the site, they are short and quite explanatory with real world examples, and then the real code where you can edit, and where you don't understand you can always refer or request for clarification. So next we have, still on the outline, we have CSS transitions. This defines how changes take place in your website. We have, instead of having in- instant changes, the changes can be smooth and aligned. So we have the transition. You first define the transition by calling it, and then you pass in the time and then the transition functions. I will have a look at them at the tail end of our CSS tutorial. We also have, now when you call the transition, you call the button maybe on hover, is you'll see changes. The transition properties we have, the transition property, the one you are working on, and then we have the transition duration. That is the time. We have the transition function, which are, for example, the is function. We have is in, is out. Uh, that is the CSS transitions. We also have transforms. These now change our content or our element that we are styling without affecting its neighboring elements. We have a transform of translating Y, that is a horizontal move. We have a transform of scaling, that is you scale an element. We have a rotation, and we have a skew. These are mostly applied in buttons. Let's say when you visit your e-commerce platforms and hover over the hover over the different products that they have, you can see the effects. Like, also there was one in our example in the site. Here, like, have a look at the, not this one, I think it was the other one. This one. Look at the different stylings that we have. When I hover over the products, you can see some changes, and this now highlights the selected item or the item on which the mouse is on. These are what we talk about when we say transitions. Then transitions and the transforms, we have a scale, we have a rotation, and then we have a skew. And then lastly, we talk about CSS animations. For example, I'm just giving you an overview of this. So for example, we define them using the keyframe, and then you define the transition you want to make. And then we have two properties, like for example here we are defining an opacity of 0, which means not visible, to 1, which means the element we are styling is clearly visible. And then you call in the animation you want to make using the animation, and then the name you defined using the keyframe. So for example here we call in the fade in our animation, and then we give it the duration and the animation function. We have some useful properties for animations which are discussed in the platform. We have the animation name, animation duration, have animation delay, which defines the time frame before the animation starts. Have the animation iteration count, the number of repeats, and then we have animation direction, can be right to left or reverse. And then we have animation fill mode, and then we have animation timing function. I think that is what I wanted to highlight on responsive development today. Because of time, I was just brushing them because we normally have 1 hour for these sessions. So we need now to proceed to styling our site. Let me just give you an overview first of how it was before we styled. You can follow along in our previous class up to where we reached to this point here. But maybe for new members, this was our site before we styled. This was our site before we applied CSS. So we said that HTML gives us the skeleton, and then HTML will give us the flesh. So after styling, we only styled the navbar and the hero section, and some styling to the main content where we have our different articles. So a brief overview of the stylings we have. Let me highlight a few. Here in the nav, we had a display of flex, and then justify content, space between, and then align item center. That defines how our nav will be presented, and also we gave a display of flex in the nav links. So for the hero section, we also had a display of flex. We have two items. We have the hero content and we have the image. And then for the display for the main container, we had a display of grid, and then we defined the sizes using two fractions for the main content, which includes the articles, and then one fraction for the sidebar. And this transformed our site to this. It was taking some shape, so you see the navbar changed. We had the hero section. So today we are proceeding to style these articles and this sidebar and the other elements. So we can proceed. We had the blogs, have the blog post. Okay. Oh, I had it there. There, and then can give it a padding of 20 pixels, and then we give it a margin bottom of 20 pixels also. We give it a border, maybe a border radius of 8 pixels from one blog post to the next. So we style the heading by giving it a margin bottom of 10 pixels. We had a small, this section here, let me show it from here. We had this small that had the author name and the date, so we also style it. Give it a display of block, and then we give it a margin bottom of 10 pixel. Yeah, so that's it. We also had the paragraph. We give it a margin bottom of 10 pixels. Good. We also had our anchor tag for the link to our blogs. This one with the read more link. So we style that. Give it a text decoration of none. Initially they have a blue color and then they are underlined. You can check that is the default styling on the text decoration on the anchor tags. And then we give it a color of okay, let's first give it a background because it's supposed to work as a background of blue, and then we give it a color of white, and then we give it a border of none, and that padding. So we also give it a width. It displays our width here of fit content. That is, it will take the size of the content and avoid an overflow. Then we have a border of none and then a border radius of 8 pixels. So that is our blog with the articles. You can see they are a bit presentable now. Then we proceed to our sidebar. So presume that is the class. Let me confirm. Yeah, we have the section with the sidebar. So let's give it a background of white. then a padding of 20 pixels, then a border radius still of 8. Then let's proceed to styling the content in the sidebar, giving them a padding, a default padding of 10 to 15 pixels. So H3. We have margin bottom, sorry, not the padding. Bottom of 10 pixels. We have the H3, and then we have an ordered list in the sidebar. So we said the default display of the unordered list is it has the dots styling. We need to remove the dot styling. So we give it a list style of none. So we proceed to the anchor tags. Okay, first we style the links and then give it a margin bottom of 10 pixels, and then we proceed to the anchor tags, and we give it a text decoration of none. And then a bold font weight. Okay, so I think those are all the components in the sidebar, and we can look. Okay, I needed a color of black for that. So, and you might, okay, for the site we don't have yet, we have not yet introduced JavaScript, and we've not added any interactivity, and the links are just static. But you can see when I hover over the categories, we have, maybe it's not distinguishable between the recent posts and the categories. So we can just remove the font weight here to make it discoverable to our user. So you can see. So for this, it's a clickable link. As you can see, when I highlight this, you'll notice it over there. At the bottom, it highlights it as a link, and this is meant to help our users to navigate to or click to different categories. If we had maybe JavaScript, we could have added functionalities and filtering the blogs into the different categories across here. And then we proceed now to our newsletter and comments together with the footer. So let's proceed to, I saw the, have a search bar. It is sidebar, and then we have the search bar here, so we need to style that. So that's sidebar. Then input, can give them this default a padding of 10, a width of 100%, that border radius. Then we proceed to our newsletter. We'll give it a background of white, background of white, and then a padding of 20 pixels, a margin of 20 pixels, and a border radius of 8. That is our newsletter. We have that one also, we give it a margin bottom of 10 pixels. Margin bottom of those pixels. We also have a button for the same, and a paragraph. Also give it a margin bottom of 10 pixels, and we have the button and the input, same styling and a different width. So a same styling and a width of 70%, a border radius of gray, and a border of gray. Then we have the button, give it that, and then a background of, let's say, this one will be gray also. So let's observe some changes. So you can see our site is taking up some shape, and I want you to take note of the different displays we used across the main content, and the one that we'll also use on the comments section. So our buttons don't have functionality yet. We haven't added JavaScript. We'll come to that when we learn about JavaScript. So now let's proceed to our comments. Still give it a background of white, same padding, margin, and a border radius. So background of white, padding of 20 pixels, margin of 20 pixels. I want you, when you are learning these concepts, I want you to look at the difference between the padding and the margin that you're talking about. Explore them and look at the difference. So let's style that H3 and give it a margin bottom of 10 pixels. We also have the comments, and then the input and the text area. So we have the comment, input, and the text area. Same padding of 10 pixels, a width of 100%, and then a border radius of 1 pixel, a border of 1 pixel and solid gray. We have a border radius of 8 pixels and a margin bottom of 10 pixels. So the comments button will also give it the default styling, a padding of 10 pixels, 20 pixels. This is padding top and padding bottom. We have a background of gray, and then we have a color of white, a border of none, and a border radius of 8 pixels. So let's save these and save the changes. So that is the shape our blogging app is taking. You can see here we've used, for example, so you can look at the styling for the comments box, like for the comments section, where we've added the display here is a flex, which is a default for forms, so we didn't need to explicitly state that in our styling. and we have the different input fields and the button. So we just styled the padding in the buttons and maybe the width. So now we can proceed to our footer section. So in the footer we have a simple title of the blog page. We have our tagline, and then we have a quick links section. We have a contact section, and we have the copyright section. So for this, we are going to, in the div container, we will apply a display of flex, and then we have these two, and style them. So let's, in the footer, give it a background of black. Background of black, and then a color of white. So, and a padding of 20 pixels. And then we have a footer container at the bottom. So we have, the footer content class. Content, so we give it a display of flex. And then we justify the content by spacing between, and then aligning items at the center, and a gap of let's do 20 pixels. So you can save the changes and observe the different. So that is how our footer now looks like. So we style now the quick links, and then the copyright section. So for the quick links, we just need to remove the URL styling. Let's proceed. Maybe don't need this gap here. Let's just remove it. So we have this had a default class. We have the quick links. The quick links. Okay, let's give it a style for a class for easy access, so we can do the quick links. Then style them. So we have a list style of none. Then we have, give it a margin bottom of 10 pixels. Then we style the anchor tags. Then we give them a text decoration of none and a color of white, so it's still the default color blue, so we give them a default color of white, and then we style the paragraph. Then we align it at the center. Then margin top, we have 20 pixels, and that is the end of our styling our blog app. So we began with introducing HTML concepts. So this is our complete blog. You can see okay. So this is our complete blog, and you can see the transformations we've been doing as we build step by step. We'll be tackling these projects step by step as I explain the different concepts so that you can know what is happening. So if you hadn't watched the previous lessons, you can catch up with them, where we began with introducing HTML semantic elements such as the div, we have the header, we have the nav, we have the footer, sections, articles, and we put them into practice in this blogging app. So in our next classes, we will be introducing some concepts in we'll be introducing now some concepts in JavaScript because we want now to bring interactivity into our website. Let's say, how could we make our search button or our search input work? How does the search filter look like? Maybe how do we add click events into buttons, and how do we submit responses that user inputs in our forms or in our sites, and how we handle them. We'll talk about interactivity in JavaScript beginning our next class from tomorrow. So thank you so much for your time, and have a blessed evening. I'll share this in my GitHub, and then I'll tag the link in the YouTube channel, so you can also always download this content, build along as you remind yourself what was happening in the class. Mr. Ring, and end the class.